So we've recently gotten some new information on the upcoming survival MMO Dune Awakening, including things like its monetization system, if the game's going to be releasing into early access, how the launch is going to go, and how future updates are going to go. So I want to go over all of this information and go over some of the information on future content we could be seeing in the game, because previously some of the developers have talked about a little bit of the things we could be seeing in the future, which are incredibly exciting for the Dune universe. Also, make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all of my Dune Awakening videos. I'm going to keep doing videos up until launch, and then I'll be doing tons of videos on everything you would expect when the game is actually launched. And this newest information does have to deal primarily with the monetization coming with Dune Awakening and specifically how it's going to launch. So Dune Awakening is going to be launching on May 20th. Its base version is going to be $49.99, and we are going to be getting pre-orders sometime soon. And it also does seem there are going to be more expensive versions of the game, probably with cosmetics in them. But we do also know there's going to be a version of the game you can buy that's going to have a 5-day early access, which I think generally people don't like, but this one is a bit more okay because after those 5 days of early access, there will be fresh launch servers coming with the full official launch. So you won't have to be playing on the same servers or the same world with the people who bought the 5 days of early access. So it's not perfect, but it's much better than just starting the game with people that have already been playing for a little under a week, where you would be super far behind. Now, on top of all of that, Dune Awakening is going to be launching in its full release version. It is going to have that 5 days of early access you can get, but the game is not launching in an early access state. There's going to be no sub fee, and it's going to be getting free regular updates. Now, it sounds like you're not going to be paying for any content. We don't know if this is going to go all the way into the future. Like, we don't know if maybe there'll be big expansions that you'll pay for in the future or something like that, but there'll be what they're calling optional DLCs. Now, what I'm thinking this is, which they didn't specifically explain, is it seems like these are going to be cosmetic packs like they did in their previous game, Conan Exiles, where you could buy a pack that just had a bunch of different cosmetics that are all kind of fit the same theme. So like a building cosmetic for all your building pieces, armor cosmetics, stuff like that. And they would release a handful of them with every new update or something like that. And they said you will be able to just purchase all of these DLCs separately or through a season pass, which will probably be like all of the packs for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of updates. Now, they really didn't specify what these DLCs were, but they said all the content is going to be free. So it does just seem like these DLCs are just cosmetic packs. They did not say if there's also going to be like a cosmetic store to where you could go buy singular cosmetics or anything like that. But it does just sound like this game is going to be a buy to play game with constant regular updates, as it's a live service game, and then you can buy cosmetics, which is pretty similar and a pretty common monetization strategy these days. Now, Dune Awakening being a live service game where you're getting all of these updates for free is one of the most exciting parts about the game, because in the Dune universe, they have so many different areas they could go and update. And then just because of how this game is being created as a sandbox survival game, there's just so many more things they could very easily add. And we've gotten some of this information previously. First off, and one of the biggest and most interesting ones in the near future, one of the first big updates, we're going to the polar ice caps on Arrakis. One of the reasons this is going to be so important is because on the launch of Dune Awakening, except for the ecology labs, which are the dungeons of the game, pretty much everything is going to be desert unless you're in one of the cities. Like, that's kind of what you would expect from Arrakis. Pretty much everything is going to be desert. There's going to be sand everywhere. And that can be a bit fatiguing, having all of the same landscape for pretty much everywhere you're going to be playing. But then going to the polar caps would give you a completely different environment while staying on the same planet and going to places that are within the lore of the Dune universe. So that's going to be one of the first things. And then we also know at some point after we've kind of explored the entirety of Arrakis, we will be going to other planets. And there's a lot of other famous planets in the Dune universe. One of the ones that will probably be the most exciting, just because it'll be such a massive change up, is Caladan, which is this lush planet just completely filled with massive oceans. So there'll be water everywhere, which will completely change up the dynamic of Dune Awakening. Like in Dune Awakening, you'll be able to get heat stroke. A big part of your survival aspects are going to be getting water from plants or creatures, saving up that water, and being able to survive the desert. Well, what happens when now you take the game as a whole and you take it to a planet that is super lush with massive oceans and water everywhere? You probably have to create completely new survival mechanics specific to that planet, which will just be incredibly interesting and will completely change up the gameplay of the game as a whole. So there are some pretty massive future pieces of content we'll be getting, and I only mentioned Caladan, but there are a bunch of other pretty well-known planets in the Dune universe where a bunch of the other main factions call their home. So we'll also be able to go to those, and because the Dune universe is so interesting and varied, a lot of those planets are almost completely different from each other, so they could implement completely different survival mechanics depending on what planet you're on in the future. Now, outside of all of those kind of bigger updates, there's also going to be tons of other updates you can do for basically every other area of the game. They obviously have things like new items, new vehicles, new weapons, all that type of new stuff, maybe new like rarities or qualities of items, anything like that, new base resources to craft new things. There's tons of stuff they can do with that, and they'll probably do that on a pretty consistent basis. But then there's even some bigger things like adding in new maps to Arrakis. We've already seen kind of some of the maps of the game that they've shown us, and there's areas that look to be set out for different areas, maybe new hubs. We know there's going to be another kind of PvE focus area similar to Haga Basin added sometime in the future. Whole new map areas that, again, Haga Basin is the size of Conan Exile, so if they add another one that size, that's a massive amount of new content. But then something that's also going to be very interesting is adding in new elements to the Deep Desert. Now, the Deep Desert is going to be the endgame PvP focus area. It's absolutely massive. It's split up into these 9 different servers and zones. It can have potentially hundreds of people fighting on them at the same time. But every week, the Coriolis storm comes through, wipes away the Deep Desert, wipes away all of the player bases, and changes up the landscape, changes up points of interest and dungeons. So they could just keep adding in new pieces of the Deep Desert. Like they could add in some new content, and the next week the Coriolis storm comes through. They added in a bunch of new dungeons that are now opened up with that storm. They could add in a bunch of points of interest. They can maybe switch up all the different resource areas. Maybe they do a big update and a big kind of change up to the Deep Desert where they change all the resource spots for that week or something. They could do a ton of stuff with this kind of randomly generated weekly reset of the Deep Desert, adding just tons of new content over time to the area that a lot of players are going to have their focus on. And we do know of some other things that have been announced to be coming sometime in the future. Like on the launch of Dune Awakening, there's going to be 2 main factions that fight over the Lancerad every week. But we do know some point in the future, they're also going to be adding a third, which is basically like a counterweight to keep the other 2 factions in check or to keep them balanced and close in terms of progression or competition. And that will be a pretty massive change up to the general aspects of the end game. And since we've gotten some of this information on future pieces of content we'll be getting and future things they're working on, I would expect they probably have a lot of new things in the works behind the scenes. And this could be everything from just new items to massive gameplay changes to a lot of the overarching systems of the game. Because with this being a sandbox focused survival MMO in such a massive and varied universe as Dune, there's just so many things that they could create and put into this game that I suspect the game is just going to continue to get more varied over time. But that's pretty much all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.